I yanked the rake toward me with precise strokes, robotically gathering every leaf that had blown up against the garage over the winter months. The April sun rose high enough into the late morning sky to radiate some heat, and I'd worked up a sweat, a sensation I enjoyed. At this pace, I figured the cleanup would take me about an hour, and then the property would look nice for Jenna's party. In a flash, I threw the rake to the ground, my left hand suddenly on fire, as if I had held onto an invisible firecracker a beat too long. Following the yellow jacket's flight away from me, I saw the old man standing nearby, mouthing words in my direction. Startled a second time, I removed my headphones to hear him. My neighbor, Richard Pritchard, who does that to a kid, stood on the road that ran behind our adjoining properties, as he did twice a day to walk his equally annoying and ancient black spaniel-looking mutt, Junebug. I like dogs, though I prefer the bigger ones. Junie always reminded me of a gremlin who'd gotten wet. "What's that?" I asked him, peeling off my glove, my brain whirring to make sense of the situation, just as I felt the electric current of the sting flowing to my fingertips and then back through my core, the sensation alternating between warm and cool. Aside from the pain at the point of injection, the sensation within my body was not wholly unpleasant, not unlike the nicotine rush that follows the first pull of a cigarette. "I said it looks like you got stung, huh, guy? That's what you get for working too hard. Isn't that right, Junie?" Pritchard said, cackling to himself as the dog sniffed at a patch of grass I'd just raked. I feigned a laugh and just nodded in return. I didn't want to say anything more and invite further conversation. Besides, I couldn't tell you if I ever enjoyed my encounters with Pritchard. He wasn't a bad person, as far as I could tell, anyway. Rather, he was one of the people who couldn't see me, a sizable proportion of the population, which seemed to include my father. To Pritchard, I was just another body to talk at, a human bucket to capture whatever he needed to discharge at the moment. When someone can't see you, there's no back and forth conversation, so there's no chance to connect and bond. I'm sure you know the type. In the nearly 2 years of being neighbors, the only questions I could remember Pritchard asking me were about my sewer bill and my name, and he'd asked both questions repeatedly. At least 3 times he'd pulled out a blue memo pad from his pocket to record my name in blue ink on a crowded little page. One time I thought to share the same mnemonic device that I'd use on the first day of class with my Psych 101 students to illustrate a practical memory technique that we'd cover later in the semester. When you see me, picture Alex Trebek, but instead of Jeopardy, imagine him hosting The Price is Right. Now, see Alex on The Price is Right stage, holding the microphone, and hear his distinct voice inviting the next contestant to come on down. Remember that image, Alex Trebek hosting The Price is Right when you see me, and you'll always have my name, Alex Price. It always worked well with my students, and when I had used it with Pritchard, his eyes lit up as if I were David Blaine pulling a six of clubs from the middle of an uncut orange. I remember his crooked smile revealing itself from his stringy white wizard beard, assuring me he'd always remember my name. But if he addressed me at all now, he called me Guy, and I left it at that. I didn't take it personally. I guessed him to be in his early 70s, and I'm sure the chemo from his thyroid cancer had taken its toll on him. Whenever we'd see each other at the mailbox or maybe down at the lake on our respective docks, he'd almost always launch into one of his monologues. Some days it was about the weather, which tended to digress into a diatribe about the climate change hoax, followed by a soliloquy on the demo rats and their covert mission to ruin the country. I never pushed back. I'd learned the futility in debating people who can't see you. It's like trying to argue with a cat that's playing with a toy mouse. So with Pritchard, I rarely said much of anything. I just listened and tried to mind the entertainment value. He'd surprised me recently by telling me about how he played bass in a blues band called House Money for many years. The home he inhabited stood about 150 feet from Jenna's place, or rather our place, as she always would correct me, but I'd never heard him play a note. Another time he told me about the UFOs in the southwest sky that he communicated with on the regular while sitting lakeside on the dock. "Don't tell the government," he'd said to me. "They'll only ruin it." I had assured him that I would not, that keeping things confidential was part of my job. Of course, being someone who couldn't see me, he never thought to ask the natural follow up of what I did for work. Instead, he just said he knew by my face that I was someone who didn't think he was crazy. I took that as a genuine compliment because I most certainly thought he was crazy. Most days I'd give Pritchard my attention because, as far as I can remember, that's been my role in life, to listen to people. I think it started with my mother. I have memories from my preteen years of her getting in her cups and telling me how she intended to leave my father, or sharing how their respected town doctor was having an affair with his receptionist. I remember thinking that I did not want to know any of this, that the subject matter was inappropriate given my age. And yet, the fact that my mother had chosen me to talk to made me feel special. I knew she wasn't talking to my father this way, certainly not to my older brother either. She trusted her secrets with me, and while they could feel heavy, carrying them became part of my identity. I still feel special when people are comfortable enough with me to tell me things, even Pritchard, who can't remember my name. But on this day, I wasn't in the mood to extend my gift of listening to my old neighbor. The clock was ticking to get everything ready for Jenna's party, and something about his laughter and his response to my pain from being stung irritated me. On top of this, I watched as Junebug squatted and relieved herself on our lawn as Pritchard purred, "Good girl." This despite my having expressed my displeasure to him several times in the past. I'd point to the brown spots and piles of shit on the lawn, to which he'd always half apologize by using the same line. "Junie must have thought you needed a little fertilizer, heh," he'd say before moving along. Whenever I'd complained to Jenna about our neighbor, she'd point out that I was engaging in the same habit that I detested in others. "Let it go," she'd say. "He's a harmless old man with a little old dog. Jesus, Alex, he walks like he's got a bowling ball between his knees. He can't bend over to pick up after Junebug. Think of how good it is to live next to a quiet recluse rather than someone loud. When you think about it, he's the best neighbor we could ask for," she'd reason. I knew her perspective to be superior, perhaps even right, because I noticed how I felt better when I adopted her line of thinking. But still, I couldn't resist mentioning that only one of us ever scooped up the little brown logs off the lawn. Done peeing, Junie barked now, stretching her leash toward a squirrel hopping close by. So I took this as a cue to replace my headphones and resume my task, but Pritchard continued. "Hey, come to think of it, you should probably be kissing that little bee's ass, right?" he said, showing the teeth from one side of his mouth, smiling to himself. I didn't understand his message, but I felt his jabbing tone. "What's that, Dick?" I asked, emphasizing the last word. "The bee," he quipped. "From what I read in the paper, it was a bee that paid for this whole shebang, right?" he added, poking his left hand toward the lake house. "The paper? A bee paying for what now?" I thought. My patience exhausted, I reached over to grab my rake and replace my glove, hoping my nonverbal cues would reach him better than my words. The old man and the dog began walking away now, but after a few labored steps, he turned back toward me and fired a final round. "Most people gotta work for a place like this, but not you, guy. Lucky son of a bitch," he said with a self-satisfied cackle. As I watched Junie try to kick her old back legs into the lawn to cover her scent, Pritchard's message landed upon me like a gut punch, and I forgot about the throbbing in my hand.